I call the mother wound a primal wound. It's almost like the root wound. So women go and seek coaching for confidence building, to get rid of their limiting beliefs, to bring more abundance into their lives, to rewire their money mindset. But all of these wounds are created by the primal wound, which is the mother wound. So,
Uma, thank you so much for accepting my invitation to appear as a guest speaker on my podcast. You are a Hay House published author, a spiritual mentor, teacher, guide. You help people step into their purpose. You help them traverse their period of grief. You help them heal from intergenerational trauma. And you came into my life in 2019 as a grief counsellor. And I quickly, before I ask you all my questions about your process as a spiritual teacher, mentor, and guide, and before speaking a bit about generational trauma and the mother wound, I quickly want to tell the story of how you came into my life, because it was not to sound woo-woo, but it was really, there was really some orchestration going on a soul level. I know that for sure. In May 2019, my cat, my Lily, she, after a period of illness, she crossed over. She breathed her last breath in my arms and she crossed over. And this happened on a Monday evening towards midnight in the month of May. And in the hours that followed her transition, her spirit leaving her body, obviously that night I didn't get any sleep, and the next day I was in profound grief. Some people unfortunately don't seem to understand this, but my Lily, she is now in spirit form my best friend, my soulmate. I just shared with her a bond, sort of a love and adoration that it's difficult to have that with a human being, I find. That kind of pure, innocent, unconditional love and adoration that I had with her. And so her sudden absence in my life, that really was very, very difficult for me. And so she crossed over on Monday night, right before midnight. In the hours that followed, I was in that place that I think so many people are familiar with. When you lose a loved one, you think you're never going to get out of that dark abyss of grief. And it was a physical pain that I experienced. And as I rocked myself back and forth to trying to find a way to live with this pain, this inner voice told me, open your computer and go check Anita Moorjani's Facebook page. And for people who don't know who Anita Moorjani, she's a near-death experiencer, and I read her book many years ago, and I've since then been following her work on Facebook and YouTube, etc. And at that point in time in 2019, Anita Moorjani held Facebook Lives on Sundays. And as I opened her Facebook page, as I went onto her Facebook page, she had just shared an announcement that exceptionally that week, she was going to hold a Facebook Live that day, that Tuesday evening, and it was going to be a Facebook Live on losing a loved one and grief. And I knew I had to watch that Facebook Live. I knew that in that Facebook Live there was going to be a message for me. And so at 9 o'clock in the evening, I sat in front of my computer, because what it was, and I think many people can identify with this, when you lose a loved one, the pain that I felt had two components to it, two aspects to it. One was missing their physical presence. And another aspect of that grief was there something I could have done to keep my Lily alive? I tried different sort of healing modalities, therapies, etc. But was there something else I could have done to keep her alive, to prolong her life? And so I felt a deep sense of regret, of guilt, or like, was there again like something? And during the Facebook Live, we could ask questions. So I asked the question, was there something I could have done to keep my Lily alive? Someone else asked an almost identical question. I think this person had lost a loved one or a sibling or a loved one, a close friend, to suicide. And she too was grappling with this question, was there something I could have done to keep them alive? And then you answered that question, and Anita Morjani answered that question, and your answer to that question allowed me to breathe more deeply. It gave me a little bit of relief from the pain that I was experiencing, because you said that there's, speaking of also from your own experience, that when we lose a loved one, if a loved one crosses over, it means their soul has chosen to cross over. No human being dies without their soul's consent. We really don't have that kind of control over someone else. If they cross over, it means their soul chose to. And that knowledge allowed me to come to a place of acceptance much, much earlier. I think had it not been for that message, I would have been in that painful sort of place for much, much longer. Yes. So welcome into my life and welcome to my podcast, Uma.
Oh my goodness, I had no idea about the story. So thank you so much for sharing that here, Özlem. And it's such an honor to be here with you. Honestly, I'm so glad you invited me to be on your podcast. Also, as we are speaking, it occurs to me that we are recording this in May, which is the same month you say Lily passed away, and you found this interview and my message.
Yes, yes, yes. No, but also, like, what are the, like, it's not something I could have orchestrated as a human being. On Monday, my Lily is going to cross over, and then the next day, Tuesday, Anita Morjani and Uma Girish are going to have a Facebook Live on losing a loved one and grief, and I'm going to get the answer that will give me a little bit of relief. Like, it's not something as a human I could have orchestrated, so there must have been some orchestration on a soul level there. Yeah.
That's for sure. I'm sure Lily was somehow responsible for it.
Yeah, she has her little cat spirit
Yes,
orchestrated it. Yes. So you just shared your journey with me. You began essentially, you became a spiritual mentor when you lost someone dear to you. And you turned your own pain into purpose. You became a grief counselor. And then from grief counseling, your work evolved into helping people find their purpose and live a life in alignment with their purpose. And eventually, your work essentially evolved into mentoring people or helping people heal generational trauma.
Yeah.
Perhaps we could first start with your journey, and then I could ask you questions about what generational trauma is, what the mother wound is specifically.
Yeah, sure. So when I started helping people heal from loss, I had no idea of the trajectory of my work, right? I was just someone who was grieving really hard. Um, I was grieving my mother's loss. She passed away in January of 2009. And I was doing a few different things. I went to a grief support group. I trained to become a hospice volunteer, and I was sitting by the bedsides of dying people. I was working with the bereavement team and helping family members. And all the experience and knowledge and wisdom and self-healing that I gathered on that journey sort of moved me to the work of working with others. It sort of naturally moved me in that direction. And then I started sitting with people who were grieving a loss. And as my life evolved post losing my mother, I found that what really opened me up deepest to healing was me living my purpose. So the piece that I became really interested in supporting clients with was the journey from pain to purpose. And as I started doing the work, the people that were right for me, the people that were asking the question, how can I take the worst thing that happened to me and turn it into something beautiful to serve the world? these are the people who were looking for someone like me. And as I started working with more and more grieving women, because primarily I work with women, I began to find that there were some losses and some forms of grief that were ancient in origin. And that led me to healing generational trauma. I found that the tears that a client was crying in this moment had a lot to do with something that happened perhaps a couple of generations ago, a story that hadn't been told, a story that hadn't been lived, addressed, forgiven in the family space. So that's how I came to integrate all of these things into um, my work on healing from loss, because then it's a much deeper and richer experience for the client when they have a more holistic understanding of what they're dealing with.
Yeah. Yeah. You say in your work also that your mother influences your self-knowledge. In fact, maybe not just the mother, maybe the whole family lineage could also be, I don't know, influences your self-knowledge. And that's why it's key to heal this wound so that you can live a life more in alignment with your purpose. And so perhaps we can start there. What is the mother wound and what is generational trauma?
Yeah, the mother wound is the wound a mother has been carrying because of what she didn't receive from her own mother or from her own family. And this woundedness is then, the pain of this wound is then transferred to her child. So the child biologically inherits the pain that the mother has lived through, but hasn't addressed because of lack of knowledge, because of lack of opportunity, lack of resources, whatever that may be. So when I say that the mother influences a person's self-knowledge, what I really mean by that is that our mother is our first experience of love. She's the one who introduces us to the world. And whether we understand the world to be filled with danger and pain, and we look at the world through the lens of suspicion and mistrust, or whether we look at the world through the lens of love and abundance, really depends on our experience with our mother, because she's the template for how every other relationship follows thereafter, because we are loved or rejected by the mother first. So essentially, our sense of self, because a child does not have a sense of self. A child comes to know who she is, whether she matters, what she's good at, her sense of worthiness. All of this originates from how the mother relates to the child. When there's a gleam in the mother's eye, the child feels loved, the child feels accepted, validated, celebrated. When the mother is unavailable emotionally, then the child feels, what did I do wrong? I did something wrong. I'm not enough to keep her attention. I'm not enough for her focus, for her love. I don't matter. And so the wound of I'm not enough or I don't matter can begin as early as in utero. And that's where the mother wound is inherited. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And how does the mother wound then manifest? What are the signs or symptoms? How does it manifest later on in life in our, say, relationships or career or the life we create, really?
Yeah, such a good question. So what happens when when mother doesn't love us or doesn't notice us or doesn't give us the attention we need as little children is we don't get the hits of dopamine that we need to really grow, to develop, to thrive. And so we start seeking those dopamine hits in the external world. As little children, it starts as we try to be the best we can. Some of us, we get the best grades. We are good little girls. We obey everyone. We take care of people. We manage their emotions. We please other people. And in all these ways, what we're doing is we are ensuring that we get these dopamine hits in the form of validation, praise, approval. Oh, you're such a good little girl. Oh, what a beautiful drawing you made. I love that you always come first in class. That becomes addictive. And so we grow into these adults who are always people pleasing, always managing other people's emotions and lives, taking care of other people. So our sense of self becomes, I'm someone who takes care of other people. I'm someone that people turn to because I'm the reliable one. This manifests as overworking, seeking our worthiness and productivity, overgiving, overdoing. And we bring this behavior into our intimate relationships as well. We begin to take care of our intimate other. We begin to want to prove our loyalty, our worthiness, how loving we are, how we can manage, how capable we are, how reliable we are. So this becomes a pattern that manifests in the way we work, in the way we show up in our relationships, our friendships. We are always in some way taking care of other people, because if we didn't take care of other people, how could we get these hits of validation and approval? So the biggest danger when we start living life like this is that we are living life without a sense of our inner core. Who am I? What matters to me? What do I value? What's the life I want to create? Many women who come to do this work with me have no sense of that because their life has been about caring for other people, about taking care of others' needs and putting themselves last. So that's one of the biggest dangers when we don't heal the mother wound, because we are still living from the place of our not self behavior and not our true self. So our not self is behaviors we learned, which became coping mechanisms very early in life in order to get our needs met. But our true self is us recognizing and valuing who we are from within.
What it is though, is that when the bond between mother and child is severed, this can happen in a somewhat more grave manner, where, say, a mother-child dies in childbirth. But it can also be in a much more subtle manner, actually. Say a mother gives birth, but in 6 months after giving birth to her child, she has to return to work. And in the past, I would hear stories of, when I was still working in an office environment, of a female colleague returning to work after maternity leave and then seeing her child again after the first day in the office, and the child just reacting, like the child just being distant to the mother, or not sort of rushing towards the mother and hugging her, but instead just being distant and aloof, and not even paying attention to the mother. So this is how can we prevent a mother wound from occurring in the first place, actually?
So I will say that the mother wound falls on a spectrum. Okay, on one end of the spectrum is the narcissistic mother, who is completely unavailable to her child. It's all about her. She's self-absorbed. She's dealing with her pain in the way that she knows, but she's completely unavailable and oftentimes not even able to take care of her child. On the other end of the spectrum is perhaps a really doting mother who is all about perhaps helicoptering. So the mother and daughter have a relationship on that end of the spectrum, which is almost clingy. They're more like sisters or girlfriends. They have to talk to each other every day. They go shopping, they eat lunch together. And many of us fall somewhere on that spectrum. Okay, so maybe you don't have a narcissistic mother, you don't have a clingy relationship with your mother, but somewhere along the spectrum is where you fall. Because let's be honest, there's no such thing as the perfect mother. Every mother did the best she could. And even the worst mother, I use the word worst as daughters call their mothers, the mothers who are completely emotionally unavailable, abusive. I'm not saying that it's right or that it's okay that it happened, but we have to acknowledge that it did happen. And this mother was dealing with her pain in the only way she knew how. It doesn't make it right, doesn't make it okay that that child had to live with that mother, but it happened. So what I want to say is women have been subjected to so many different kinds of circumstances and situations that were not conducive to their own self-nurturing, right? We are still fighting patriarchy on many levels. And at least women today have a better chance of doing it than women who lived in the 50s and 40s and even prior to that. In that world, women didn't have a voice. They were completely dependent on the men in their lives for sustenance, for pretty much everything. So they didn't have a voice. They didn't get their needs met. Sometimes they needed to be manipulative in order to get their needs met. They had to cozy up to the toxic masculine in order to get their needs met. And so imagine when these women became mothers, they were just giving their children what they knew how to give. So I don't know that we can ever avoid the mother wound, because it really depends on where a woman is and what she has lived through, which impacts how she parents, correct? Which impacts how much she's available to her children. But I will say our job, I think now, is to recognize if we've grown up with a mother who was emotionally or physically unavailable or abusive, and to take steps to heal that wound. Because I call the mother wound a primal wound. It's almost like the root wound. So women go and seek coaching for confidence building, to get rid of their limiting beliefs, to bring more abundance into their lives, to rewire their money mindset. But all of these wounds are created by the primal wound, which is the mother wound. So I feel like the work needs to begin right there.
Yeah. Now, I mean, as I said earlier, this weekend I read Mark Wolynn's book on intergenerational trauma, and he says the interrupted bond between mother and child can become a breeding ground for many life struggles. We lose our lifeline. It is as if we break into pieces and then need our mother later on in life to put us back together. So, yeah,
yes,
mother of all wounds, as you say.
Yeah, Mark Wolynn is the person who trained me, so I adore his work, and I like how he talks about the mother wound. And I totally believe what he says, that that's where the shattering happens, unfortunately, very early in life, because as children, we are completely powerless. When we are faced with a mother, we depend on her for all our needs, right? Every single need. And we are faced with this woman who hasn't dealt with her own pain, who doesn't know how to deal with her own pain, who's still fighting her demons. And we are definitely caught in the crossfire.
Yeah. Can we also inherit the mother wound from our father? And I speak a bit from my own experience, because I know that my paternal grandmother died in childbirth. Is that something we can inherit?
Absolutely. I mean, the father wound is as real as the mother wound, but the reason we focus on the mother wound first, even if there's wounding from the father's side of the family, is because, like I said, the mother is the first relationship to the child. The father only comes online, so to speak, 9 months later, right? 10 months later. So the very first place the wounding can happen is with the maternal template. But it is absolutely possible, and oftentimes happens, that there is a wounding that can happen from the father's side of the family, depending on what he lived through and how much he was nurtured by his own mother. What was the dynamic there? So definitely that is something you need to look at as well, not just the mother wound, but the mother wound is where it begins, because especially as daughters, we look to the mother for a role model. And oftentimes that role model isn't available. I mean, but it's only when we grow into our own um, adult selves that we begin to make sense of, oh, I don't want to be like that. I don't want to be as hurtful, as emotionally shut down or unavailable. I want to be a kinder, compassionate, more self-aware human, right? And fortunately, we live in times when we have more resources available. We also have more privilege than our mothers and their mothers and their mothers had. I mean, they were the survival generation. They didn't have time to sit down and read self-help books. None of it was even available, all those years ago. So we have access to more resources. So I feel that this generational trauma and how it manifests in people's lives, there's so much awareness about it. There's so much conversation around it because this is the time for many people to heal it because there are finally resources and access and privilege.
Yeah, and that's now our task, I think. Yeah, I remember when I was a young child, when my mother was absent because, I don't know, she had an appointment somewhere or so. I would, at home as a young child, I would be so afraid that something would happen to her and that she wouldn't come back home. And it was I would really be crying in her absence as a young child. And it's only in hindsight when I realized that my father lost his mother actually at such a young age, that maybe this is something that he passed on to me because he didn't know how to heal this. He didn't have access to the resources that I have access to now. So yes, how do we, because it's one thing to have awareness that we have this wound, and it's quite another thing to integrate it. So how do we go from healing to integration?
So first of all, to go back to what you were saying a moment ago, children, Mark Wolynn always says, children reflect or mirror what's unresolved between their parents or behind their parents, meaning the families the parents came from. If they have been unaware, in fact, sometimes completely unconscious of what was happening in their lives, in their families, mother's mother, mother's grandmother, mother's great-grandmother, oftentimes how these traumas announce themselves is the child begins to reflect. The child begins to exhibit symptoms of the trauma. Because traumas will keep coming down the lineage until someone raises a hand and says, I'm going to heal this. Because that's why traumas keep showing up. They keep reappearing in the lineage so that they can be healed. So I just wanted to mention that. So when there's trauma in the family or with the mother, sometimes generationally, women aren't even aware that there are these traumas, right? Or the traumas causing their misfortune or suffering in some way. So they come to a therapist or a counselor or a coach or a mentor, such as myself, and they're coming to me because they're suffering in some way. So it is my job as the expert, as the mentor, to dive into details of their family stories and try and figure out what is really going on here. Is this present time grief or is it past grief? Is it ancient grief? So through asking them a series of questions, through working with a questionnaire, through getting into family stories, and putting together the pieces of the puzzle to help them see the pattern that emerges, the first place is we create self-awareness. So that's the first step. Many of my clients will say, wow, I didn't even know this is how it's playing out in my life. I didn't know these pieces were connected. So the very first thing we do is create awareness about where was this bond broken between mother and child? Why did this bond break? Why was mother who she was? What didn't she receive that she needed from her mother? And so on. We put all these pieces together. Once the self-awareness is there, there's usually, in some cases, greater compassion, but where there's been terrible wounding, it's still hard for a daughter to find that sense of deep compassion for the mother, but at least there's understanding. Oh, okay. I can look at my mother as a person on a movie screen, like I'm watching the movie of her life, and I can understand this is what made my mother who she is. Even if I can't feel a deep sense of compassion for her, many women do end up feeling a sense of compassion and understanding, but where there's deep wounding and a lot of abuse, at least the person gets to a place of understanding. Oh, she couldn't give me what she didn't receive herself. So it's not that this was deliberate or intentional. It seems deliberate or intentional because a mother is supposed to take care of her child. A parent is supposed to look out for the safety and well-being of their child. But when we go deeper into the stories, we begin to see how deprived her own childhood was, how barren the landscape was over there, and how little she received. And so once we create the self-awareness, we move to understanding and compassion. And then the integration is about using somatic practices, breath work, healing the inner child, healing images, creating new neural pathways for my clients in order for them to find their own core, because that's what's gone missing in mother wounding. They don't know who they are because their mother wasn't there to tell them who they are. Often the mother was extremely critical, extremely judgmental, abusive. And so this person always grew up believing that they were no good. So the first place is to strengthen their sense of self, their inner core. And we do this using the breath. We do this using healing sentences and images. We do it with ritual. We do it with connecting them with their inner child, helping them reparent the child who had to do without a lot because the mother was so broken. Yeah, that's how. And over time, integration doesn't happen overnight. The more they work with these practices, this is why I work with my clients for 3 months for starters.
Yeah.
We do 6 sessions over 3 months. And then if they need a deeper level of integration, I'll throw in a few more sessions, but it happens over time. But as they begin to see how these practices are helping rewire their neural pathways and helping them feel more centered, feel more connected to themselves, how it lessens their anxiety, how it stops them from being reactive and responsive instead, becoming responsive instead, they begin to see the value in these practices. And the longer and deeper they work with these practices, the more they benefit.
Yeah. And what if some of these memories are irretrievable? What if your mother is still alive? Of course, you can simply ask them the question, you can have a conversation with them. But what if they're no longer there? Or because we cannot know what really happened, or remember at least, or most of us at least, what happened in utero. And so how then? Well, we would hope then, there's perhaps someone who could tell us what might have happened when, the mother was pregnant with a child.
In many cases, even if the mother's alive, the daughter is not willing to ask her these questions. Oftentimes, there's not even a relationship there, or the relationship is so tenuous or strained that she doesn't feel like she can go and talk to her mother or have a conversation about any of this. So if there are stories that we have access to, that's fine. But the work does not depend on how much we remember. Yeah, it is not about being able to retrieve the memories. I've helped clients who have no recollection and no access to those stories. But when we understand that these practices are energetic, everything is energy, and energy shifts, energy transforms. We don't have to have access to the story. We just have to know something happened because the client is obviously suffering. And there's a mother, or there's a parent, or there's not a parent because the parent died early. That is the location of the trauma. We know that. We may not know the stories about what happened to mother because she died when the daughter was 4, right? We don't have access to those stories unless the daughter has a relationship with her aunt or a grandparent or some elder in the family who can fill in those gaps. But even if those stories are not available, the work we do takes deep root because of the energetic nature of the healing. So I have seen clients who don't know very much about their mother's story or their lineage, but who come to me with real suffering and real trauma. But we've been able to work through using healing images, healing sentences, because think about ancestral energies. We may not know our ancestors, but we know that we came from a long line of people. And we can talk to these people, we can communicate with them, we can create rituals. So this is the work that I focus on. So if the stories aren't available, then it doesn't matter. We just do the work energetically, and I have seen results, incredible results.
Yeah, I think also when there is a mother wound and some needs weren't met in childhood, I think you tend to recreate situations later on in life where you actually unknowingly are looking for the mother, to sort of help you or support you or provide you or give you that love or that support or nurturance that you didn't actually get when you were a young child.
Yes.
Yes.
Often this wound is transferred to the intimate partner. It's the partnership that struggles and suffers, because when we come into an intimate partnership carrying a mother wound, we often pick a partner who either reflects some of what we received from our mother in some way. So if we had a very critical mother, we pull in a partner who's critical. If we had a judgmental mother and we were defined by those judgments, we'll often pull in a partner who judges us. Sometimes we are hyper vigilant because of the wounding that occurred, that we may pull in a good partner, but because of our hyper vigilance, we question everything they do, everything they say from that place of hyper vigilance, and we end up pushing them away. So when the mother wound isn't healed, you're absolutely right. We can project this onto the people in our lives. It's even projected onto friends. It doesn't have to be a spouse, but we could look at a best friend and we project our mother wound onto the best friend, and the relationship dynamic struggles because of that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, this is, and I mean, thank God that there are people like you who help people heal, become aware, and then heal and integrate it, and for people sort of to live a better life. You know, couldn't the mother wound also affect perhaps our finances, or
Yes.
career? I recently heard someone who's knowledgeable in family constellation work say that the mother the mother influences actually our internal world, our relationships, the home, the marriage, and the father more the external world, actually, sort of the career, finances. But I'm not sure if that's true. Like maybe the mother wound influences actually the career and finances too. What would your view
So
be?
yeah, in my experience, I find that the mother wound influences all areas of our lives. So think about it. Because of the mother wound, you grow up into an adult who is extremely busy, who's extremely productive, because your sense of worthiness is attached to how productive you are. So you work really hard, which means your work becomes your identity. So without work, you don't know who you are. Your work defines you, your title in the office defines you, the car you drive and the place where you live, the perks of that work life, they begin to define you. Oftentimes what happens is that with the mother wound, because the mother to me represents abundance, this a child who is nourished and nurtured on an abundance of love and care, that child grows into an adult who trusts herself, who trusts the path she's on, who trusts herself, who trusts the world, right? When we have a mother wound, we haven't been able to trust mother. Mother is unpredictable. Mother rages very unpredictably. When I come home from school, I don't know what I'm going to encounter. Maybe she's going to be in a dark, evil mood, or maybe she's going to be like really nice and kind. That sense of unpredictability, which means I don't trust. How can I trust something which is not predictable, where I don't find safety? So the daughter then, becomes a person who doesn't trust mother and therefore doesn't trust herself, because it's the mother who gives you your sense of trust. When she constantly, gives you the message that you are enough, that you're good, you are worthy of love and belonging. So when that goes missing, she doesn't trust herself, the child, the daughter. And if she grows up into someone who wants to follow a particular path, she will be nervous about following something where she doesn't trust herself to create that life, to make it happen. She will fall upon stability in the external world as a way to take care of her needs. Okay, and that's not a bad thing. We all need safety. We all need money. We live in a world where money is the currency of exchange. I never tell anybody, just follow your passion, go do your thing and be responsible. No, it's not about that. But when mother represents abundance, there's more self-belief in the human she raised. And that translates into opportunities, into money, into work that she loves. Such a person may be willing to give up work she doesn't really align with in order to follow a path that's calling to her. Whereas a person who lacks that kind of self-belief would prefer to play it safe. Or because of her traumatized condition, not even be able to find work enough to pay the rent, pay the bills, live a sustainable lifestyle. Yeah.
I see. Yeah. And also perhaps as a last point, sometimes the relationship with a parent can become so difficult that we might feel the need to distance ourselves from them. But that is not a solution either. And as I was reading Mark Wolynn's book this weekend, what he says is that when we reject or distance ourselves from a parent, the reverberations of that are felt in us as well. Pushing a parent away is akin to pushing away a part of ourselves. And when we cut ourselves off from our parents, the qualities we view as negative in them can express in us unconsciously. And so that's why I think many of us, we tend to repeat our parents' patterns in life unconsciously. There's sort of this unconscious subterranean thread that we weave with the rejected parent, I think.
Yeah, whether or not we have our parent in our lives. So let's say we have a difficult mother, we are 36 years old, but we still have some kind of a relationship. Whether that be the case, or you're a 36-year-old who's decided to cut your mother out of your life, so you have no communication or contact with her, both will definitely express traits or behaviors that they rejected in that mother. Unconsciously. We're not conscious of these behaviors, but what tends to happen is that when you grow up with a very critical mother, you become self-critical. When you grow up with a mother who is a perfectionist and only judged perfectionism as the gold standard, you were only acceptable if you were perfect, you internalize that message. And you become a perfectionist and you begin to demand that of yourself and others. So behaviors and traits that we reject in our mother, we express unconsciously. Many times that is true. But I will also say that there are cases where a daughter is not able to have a relationship with the mother because the mother is extremely, like I said, she's extremely wounded, still fighting her own demons, that to allow her access into your life would be to create complete and utter chaos, in your life, the lives of your children, your spouse, etc. So you are trying to build a healthy ecosystem over here and not repeat the mistakes that your parents did or your mother did. But what I often will say is that you can have room for her in your heart, even if you have no room for her in your life. So we still have to work through compassion, forgiveness, acceptance, and we have to include her, even if we've excluded her from our physical life. So she's not allowed access to where we live because she could be dangerous. We don't visit her. There's no communication or contact in that sense, but you would still maybe set a place for her at the dinner table. Tell your children stories about the times that you remember that were good, that was somewhat good. So, because excluding someone from the family just recreates the trauma. Carl Jung says that beautifully. Whatever is excluded will resurface to be included. So, exclusion is not the answer. Finding some way of including the person and honoring them is important, even if you decide that they can't have access to your life because it is not healthy for you to include them in your life, because there would be more chaos and disturbance.
And so yes, as I quoted you earlier, you say your mother influences your self-knowledge, and that's why it's key to heal this wound so that you can live a life more in alignment with your purpose. And then perhaps sort of on that a bit, you speak about sort of common myths about stepping into your purpose or living life on purpose. Do we have to find our purpose? And if we do, does life then suddenly become magic? Or what's your view on that?
Purpose anxiety is a very real thing in the world we live in, right? Everybody is so anxious about finding their purpose or following their purpose. I often think of purpose as something that is coded within us. It's not something external to us, so we don't have to find our purpose. We have to find ourselves, because we are our purpose. We are our purpose because each one of us, doesn't matter if there are 8 billion people on the planet, each one of us is a unique expression of the divine. And so when I am one expression of the divine and you are another, our purpose is lived, expressed by who we are, how we show up in the world. Where we've gotten off track is that many of us were raised in families where we were told to follow the successful ones, the overachievers, the ones that made it, the ones that did it right. So we grew up believing there's some kind of a formula that if I follow the formula, I will get to the pot of gold. This is where human design, which is another system I work with intimately and I have been studying for 5 years, lets us know that each one of us is a unique expression, and we have our own unique blueprint of how our energy works, how we experience stress, how we deal with emotions, how we are meant to express our identity, the direction we are meant to follow, so many things, and how we express our purpose. So when we go back to that, the truth of the matter is that when we know who we are, we can live more in alignment with our purpose. What gets us off track, like I said before, what makes life hard is we are trying to be other people. We are trying to live other people's lives. And that's why everybody is confused and scrambling and saying, where can I find my purpose? Where can I find my purpose? So the thing is to come back home to yourself. And the first step is to ask, who am I? What am I here to do? What are my values? What matters to me? What makes me cry? What makes me angry? What excites me? What are my unique gifts? What do my friends come to me for? These are all the places where you find the answers to who you are. And that is your purpose. The other common myth that I find when it comes to purpose is most people believe, I find my purpose and life is going to be this magical journey. Your purpose is the thing that will test everything that that hasn't that has been out of alignment in you. So your purpose will test your resilience. Your purpose will test your ability to go against the grain. Your purpose will test your ability to speak your truth, to self-express, even if it isn't aligned with what everyone else is saying and being and doing. Your purpose will test your ability to be patient, to learn how to wait, to allow the universe to come up with a plan for what you can't do on your own. There are so many things that you grow into when you start on your purpose journey. So it's this big fat myth that once you find your purpose, life is going to be paradise and everything will be magical. It's not glitter and stardust. When you find your purpose is when you really begin to grow and evolve and live into the truth of who you are.
Yeah, you get out of your comfort zone, essentially.
Exactly right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, yes. My Uma, it's always such a pleasure to talk to you.
Likewise, Oslem. I'm so grateful we had this chance to connect and have this conversation. And my intention anytime I come on an interview like this is I usually say a prayer right before we go live and record. And my intention is just that this conversation serves every listener, no matter where they are on their journey,
Yes.
that it offers them hope, inspiration, a sense of direction. It helps them feel seen and heard and loved.
Yes, yes. Where can people find you if they want if they want to heal, if they want to work with you?
The best place to find me is on my website, umagirish.com. That's umagirish.com. I have a podcast called Being Fully Me, which is available on Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you find your podcasts. So that's another way to stay in touch with me. I release an episode every 10 days. Right now, we just finished season 1, so I'm taking a break and recording episodes for season 2. So those are the places you can find me. I got off social media about a month ago, and so my website is the best place to find me.
Yes, your website and your newsletters too.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
And life without social media has been calm, you say.
Extremely calm. Time has expanded. My mind is so clear. I sleep so much better. It was the best decision I ever made.
Yeah. All right. Thank you very much, Uma.
Thank you so much for having me.